Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to film this episode today on the 2013 escapade that my mother went on back in the summer of 2013. Now, I had been working really hard at that point for, about 15 years and had started my first business at age 11. So in 2013, I was almost 30? I was like 29, I think. Yeah, there was this escapade that went on, and this was what really tipped the boat for me to realize my mother was into something more malicious other than just spreading gossip and manipulating. So this was the year that it all first became known that there was a bigger problem than initially thought, other than the fact that she's just a manipulative narcissist with Munchausen by proxy poisoning food. So, in that year, I had already been 100% self-employed. My oldest son's dad, because I only had two kids at the time, my oldest son's dad and the girl he was dating, neither one of them had worked for about 10 years. That girl was getting her money from her ex-husband, and I don't believe my son's dad was getting money from anywhere, but he was living in her house where they didn't have any bills, and she's mooching from her dad and her ex-husband. But what they saw was how hard I'd always worked, and they saw I was leveling up, and I'd started another new business, and here I was making even more money, and here they decided they thought they were going to play the game they're playing with her ex-husband with me, and they're going to get me for money and take my son, is what they thought. But what they didn't realize is he was already like 11 or 12. He was already older, and he had never paid anything on him, and he had already had all these child support arrears. They weren't going to be getting anything from me, so nobody was thinking about this properly either. And at the same time, my mother has this long-running idea that she is going to snatch all of my children and have custody of them, which she has done numerous times from the time they were all born to the current. And you can view the different videos. I talk about this in numerous different videos because it happens over and over again. It has been going on all this time since 2002. So she decided she was going to hire an attorney for my daughter's dad and get custody of my daughter that way. And she just promised him he would never have to pay child support if he just signed this document, which he signed without reading. And she typed up a whole fake story, told this attorney this whole fake story, and they all ran with it and went to court with it. And then he realized, because there's no grandparents' rights where we live in Michigan, once we get in the courtroom, because she's not allowed in the courtroom, it's just a mediation between him and me. And prior to that, there was no problem between him and me. She realized that she wasn't going to get anywhere because he wasn't going to go against me to that degree with where I was in life and what I was doing. That was not a good idea or in his best interest. And all he did was basically get custody on paper for weekends and was going to hand her to them on the weekends. But mind you, at this point, she had already portrayed to all her family members, friends, neighbors, and everybody she knows that she had raised and had custody of my kids for the previous 10 or 11 years or so. Because by then my son was like 11, my daughter was like 8 maybe. So she already had this false narrative portrayed to all these people at that time when this all occurred. And her excuse is, I chase men in different states, and I'm off running around. I'm this broke loser with no job, doing this and that, and doing drugs, and I got this mental disorder, and none of that's real. I've been 100% self-employed for many years and in many different states, and yes, I can travel and work where I want, when I want, if I want. I can do it right now if I want. That's not what I have going on right now. I have a lot of things on my plate, but I'm just saying, if I wanted to, that's what I could do if I wanted to right now. But in that moment, here she had portrayed, because I had gone down to Ohio to start working in Ohio, which I had done prior to that. She just has no clue anything about me. There's no relationship. There's no knowledge of anything I'm up to or what I do or how I make my money or anything. She has no knowledge of any of this. So I went down to Ohio again during that time. And she uses, if I date somebody, she uses this as an excuse to steal my children. She's dating this loser, this drug addict, She doesn't know anything about anybody I've ever dated. She's only crossed paths briefly with like 2 or 3 people I've ever dated, like in passing a couple times ever in life. So she knows nothing about any of them ever. So I don't know how you get that much information crossing paths with somebody like a couple times ever, but that's how it all started. At the time, I do now realize that she had gotten my daughter to become Catholic and get her baptized and make her communion all in one sitting. And I do now know the reason for that. I didn't fully understand it then, but there is more to Weil that occurred that year as well, earlier that year. And she got her sister and my cousin to be the godparents. And there's other reasons for that as well, because it also ties in with her portraying herself to have always had custody of my daughter along the way and my oldest son along the way. It ties in with all of that. However, it did not fully click on why that was so heavily pushed at that time until, I don't know, the end of last year probably. I fully figured it out. But there's more to it. So that was the year that all happened. So my daughter was an altar server at St. Roch's Church here in Flat Rock, where my house is now. I did not have this house back then. But I was working in Ohio. I did go down to Ohio. My mother had staged a whole incident where she was gaslighting me, as she did while I was growing up. So I was 29. Here she is gaslighting me, getting to the point where I have to yell back at her because she's just screaming delusions at me. And then waits for my dad to come in, and my dad thinks I'm the problem because she's done this my entire life and gets away with it because they have no other children, and she's been able to portray this for all of these decades, which is exactly why I cut ties at 18 and left. So immediately I just made sure that I left. It doesn't matter where I go. I make all of my own money. I provide everything for myself. Always have, always will. So it didn't matter that I'd packed up. I took my 2 kids. We left, went to Ohio. Didn't matter. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, who I'm dating. I pay for everything myself. I was already in the process of working on buying my next home with cash. Had been stacking and saving for a couple of years. I'd filed bankruptcy a couple of years prior to that. Went strictly cash. Was saving everything. Had looked at a handful of homes. There was 1 in Florida and 4 in Michigan, I believe, that I had looked at. Over in a couple in Romulus, Brownstown, and Taylor is where I had found them, kind of in the country. Each one was a little more set back in the country setting. And then I was looking at a condo in Florida as well. So there was 5 almost homes that I almost went with. Ended up not doing it. Honestly, looking back on it, any one of those moves would have been sufficient. I would have made plenty of money off any of them. Any one of them would have worked fine. And it would have stopped all of this manipulation. But again, I was just not, at this point, figuring out how extreme this manipulation really is, how extreme, like, her issues really are, what's really going on. So I didn't know. If I would have known what I know today, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have just made one of those moves. And I didn't. And due to that little escapade she caused in 2013 completely wiped me out tens of thousands of dollars. And because my oldest son's dad and that girl he was dating had their own agenda separately, they worked together to go against me because they each had their own agenda. Each one of their agenda was money. So that ended up wiping out tens of thousands of dollars right out of my pocket. It was enough to buy the whole home with cash, and because the escapade went on for months. It went on for about 5 or 6 months in total before it got situated to where it was no longer allowed to go on because of the manner in which I went about stopping it. So, yes, I abruptly left after the gaslighting incident. It didn't matter. It was summertime. I'd always driven my kids to school and picked them up. At no time had my mother ever participated in that. I took them to school every day. Nobody ever drove my kids to school but me. And then at some of the times, because I did work at Applebee's for a few years as well while I was doing other things, sometimes I wasn't off yet, but my dad was passing through. He would pick them up on his way home. So, like I said, my mother had some contact with my 2 older kids because we maintained contact with my dad. And due to that, it allowed the 2 older kids to get a significant amount of brainwashing into them, which is still instilled today. To this day, there's still an issue because of all of that. But by the time I'd figured this out, they were too old, too much had been done, too much damage, and it's too late. It's not reversible. I don't believe it's ever going to be reversible. And at the same time, my oldest son's grandma had the paternal grandma. There's a problem there as well, separately. They are not on the same team. So, Yes, my daughter was an altar server. After earlier that year, my mother had kind of forced this baptism and communion thing on her. But now I'm aware that there was more, legally wise, there was more to that and why she needed that documentation. And she had also told that church false information as well, because I was sent a letter in the mail that came to their address, which made no sense. I've never had their address ever anywhere in any system since I was 18. And it had a different last name on it as well. So I know she told them a whole false story about me, plus the way they were looking at me and the strange questions they had asked. She controlled what was known, and it wasn't real. Whatever she was telling them was not real. So I don't have the full story. But I do know at that time when this escapade happened that the priest was actually the priest who had baptized me at the church in Detroit that they belonged to for all those years in Southwest Detroit. And here he was the priest at this church here down the street, St. Roch's in Flat Rock. And the day that this escapade all happened, I was in Ohio for, I don't know, a week maybe. I don't even think it was a week. Within that week, a whole escapade had started. My daughter had signed up for some cheer camp. For some reason, the deranged lunatic seemed to think that because I took off because she's gaslighting me, that means my daughter's not going to attend the cheer camp that I paid for, which that doesn't make any sense. And then I paid for golf lessons for my son, or my dad had paid for them, and it got cut short because it was my mother creating the problems. We just had to leave in that moment. So I had all the necessary materials with me to make my next moves, get my next setup started. I had been looking at different houses in that Ohio area where my current home that I have down there still is. I've been looking at them since the beginning of 2009. That was the very first time I started looking down there at homes. So I looked at homes down there on numerous occasions. Previously, I was already, well, no, I think this is when this all happened, but I was granted the ability to take my daughter down to Ohio at some point because our court order was out of Monroe, which is right there by the border, so that's not far. It's just right across the border. But there was numerous issues here. Still, I took my daughter to do the altar server thing down at the church in Flat Rock. Came back up to do it that Sunday, whatever. So yeah, I had this guy with me. Doesn't really matter. I still run everything by myself. I'm still self-made, self-built, still running everything myself. Doesn't matter who I date or what I'm doing. Everything is still mine individually. We show up, and she puts on a whole show at St. Roch's Church here in Flat Rock in July of 2013. Puts on an entire show for the entire church. Everybody in there had followed into, the area where you walk in by the front door, but kind of not so much in the church. But there were so many people. They were everywhere. She put on such a show, screaming how I'm on drugs. You're on drugs! You're on drugs! You're on drugs! Is what she was doing in front of all of these people, hundreds of people. And the whole thing was all delusions. She waited until my daughter did the whole altar server thing, until the mass was over. It got followed into the hallway. I'm like, okay, quickly, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here, because I already knew she was brewing and stewing to do something, and that's what she was brewing and stewing to do. So she put on an entire show. This is how she's able to get entire congregations of churches to back her on her having custody of my children, me being this drug addict, mental disordered, broke loser, all these delusions that all these people believe, all these decades, because she has numerous congregations of churches believing this. I'm not even sure of all of the names of them, but it's more than one. I know that. More than two, I believe. And so she puts on this whole show. How fucking embarrassing. I have never been more embarrassed a day in my life. That is hands down the most embarrassing moment of my life. The most embarrassing show that has ever been put on in my entire life. And if you understood everything else I've been through in life, it's kind of funny because there's a lot of incidences I've been through in life. Hands down, that is the most embarrassing show that's ever been put on. Now, we hurried up and we left, and within, I believe the cheer camp was the next day or two, come back up for that. Mind you, I'm staying not even as far as my current other house is in Ohio right now. It wasn't even as far as where I am right now, where, it's an hour from this house, and that church is down the street from this house. It was less time than that away. So I don't know where this deranged lunatic is just like coming up with all this false information. At one point, she'd even attached an email to the lady at the church about everything being up in the air because I'm just this hot mess running around Ohio somewhere. No, like the whole thing was just all delusions. So within those couple days, the cheer camp had started. I'd brought my daughter up. I believe it was 3 days worth of cheer camp. I get served paper. She gets my dad to not go to work. And then gets my daughter's dad to meet me there in his work truck to serve me the papers to steal my daughter immediately on an emergency hearing that I'm a danger to my children. The entire the whole court paper, the whole set of paperwork, all of it, all completely false. The attorney made it all up. The dad made it all up. My parents made it all up. Every statement in there. All either there might have been like 5% of half truths in there, and the rest was all delusions. So I got served this paper in Brownstown. It actually happened at Woodhaven High School. That's where the cheer camp was. That's technically Brownstown. So you got my dad showing up. My ex shows up. He'd been living on the other side of the state for like 7 years. He had just started working back on this side of the state. He's not seeing her regularly. Had not been for some years. I had custody of those 2 kids and raised them all those years myself. And he had nothing to do with her at that point. So here he shows up in his work truck, and then he's working for Dish Network at the time, prior to him working at AT&T. Then my dad takes a day off work, shows up there, and the Brownstown police show up, several cars deep. And now here I am, all confused, don't know what the hell's going on, don't even have the ability to read the documents because it was so chaotic and absurd and off the wall, out of nowhere, out of left field. I had to call my friend, so still a friend of mine today. She was a little more logical back then, but she had to show up and intervene, and she was more logical than I was in the moment because it was so chaotic and extreme and extravagant out of nowhere that I was not thinking straight. I didn't know what the fuck to do. I didn't know what was going on, and I had to leave with her, and so I could like gather my thoughts. We're trying to figure out what the fuck's going on here, and so I left with her, and we're starting to figure out kind of like what is actually going on because we didn't really know right away. It took some time to figure out what my mother was actually up to. Why would this even be going on? My friend was even there yelling at, because she knows all parties involved. So she's yelling at each individual involved because she knows them all for years as well. And here she is yelling at my dad. Why are you listening to your wife? She's yelling at my ex. Ooh, where the fuck where have you been? You haven't been around in years. I've been the one parenting your daughter. Where the fuck have you been? And then she's over here and she's making truthful statements. So this just turned into a chaotic disaster. And it all stemmed from this whole like scene my mother had put on at the damn church. Got this whole congregation of people believing all this bullshit about me. And I'm sure these people all live near me currently. Thank God I spend most of my time in the house. I don't talk to most of these people around here where my house is in Flat Rock. But, yeah, I'm sure some of these people all attend that church. Like, how embarrassing. I look exactly the same today as I did then. So, like, hopefully, like, they don't remember. I'm sure they do. But the whole thing is sick. It's disgusting. There's numerous congregations, like I said. I did have to wait the few days out, and then we attended this hearing, and that's where, my mother wasn't allowed to go into the hearing. That was where me and then the dad go in, and then he's like, what? You could have her on the weekend. I don't know what the heck. So in order to make all of this chaos stop, and these, the harassment, the crimes, the police conduct, and then separately this was going on with my older son as well. When these losers hadn't worked in 10 years, and here there's this fight about or this disagreement about when and where he's supposed to get dropped off at a specific time, and this and that. It turned into situations that didn't need to happen, and it destroyed 2 of my businesses and cost me like somewhere between 30 and 40 grand, and lost both businesses. So that's what came out of that. Nothing but that came out of that. So you cost me the house I was about to cash out on. And matter of fact, because all that had abruptly happened so quickly, this all went down in under a week. Here I was about to just go purchase the home in Ohio because I was working down there as well. And I was still working in Detroit. It didn't matter. I would just go whichever one I was going to go to. It doesn't matter. I could still do that right now if I wanted to. So the whole thing was a problem. This all went down in under a week. And then eventually, once my daughter's dad eventually read the papers down the line, like a month or two down the line, after they had wiped me out financially by doing this, and then I had missed some work as well because I was so distraught. I didn't know what the hell was going on. My kids were just kidnapped and missing for like 2 good weeks. My older son was kidnapped for 2 good weeks. And mind you, he had high-functioning autism, so this is what caused it to be known that he had high-functioning autism and get diagnosed. He was a little bit older, but that's what caused it to be diagnosed, because he didn't realize he was kidnapped and shouldn't have been over there that long missing when I'm the one building and providing everything. So none of that added up. I ended up having to use CPS to get him back once that occurred. It went on for some time, and then my daughter's dad eventually called me and said, well, I didn't know these papers said all that. And I'm like, well, what the fuck did you think you were doing? Still to this day, like, he's not the brightest crayon in the box. That's like, he doesn't read anything. He just signs it, doesn't even question it. So, I just said, like, this is some bullshit. I don't know what the fuck you thought you were doing. But in order to shut it down, basically I had to work with him to get it all shut down. And that's what shut it all down eventually. Because not only that, there was all these issues, and then because the summer was over, Ohio wasn't as profitable as Detroit was at the time. So I was more kind of coming back toward Detroit to work some more out of Detroit. And I was still struggling to kind of operate my one business a little bit, most of which was a little north of Detroit. So here I am trying to come back up to Michigan a little more. It doesn't matter. Many people run many businesses in numerous states and have children. So there's nothing neurotypical about what had gone on here. This is all extreme non-neurotypical behavior, extreme delusions, extreme crimes, and harassment by all these agencies and people involved. So eventually, what I did was I ended up working with my daughter's dad and to get the situation under control, to cut my parents out of the situation. We just then further had no contact for about a year or two, and we had to cut my dad off as well. We ended up, because we had always maintained a separate relationship with my dad, because of his involvement and what she had pinned him to do against me, and the role he had played in all this. Once I had gotten with my daughter's dad to shut it all down, because that was my only option in order to pick up the pieces of my life from that point forward, we had to cut my dad off as well. So we cut him off as well for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then I had to buy a whole nother car over this situation, because she's got different police departments flagging my car in different cities and states all over the place. And my car had been paid for a long time. I had a new car, but it was still paid for quite some time. I just went and bought another car is what it was. And then I gave him my car. And I'm just like, help me get another one. You can have it. I'm like, this thing is like, got all this bad energy. She caused all these problems. But we ended up working together, shutting it down, and we completely cut contact with both of them for some time. And then my kids just weren't really allowed to go over there very often. I just worked with him because they were still a little bit younger. And because like I had gotten an apartment, which I've never had an apartment, I've always owned. So I had an apartment, one for 1 year and one for about 6-7 months. And then I'd rented a mobile home for 1 year. But then I was pregnant with my youngest one and had to rent it for a 2nd year, and then bought the current home that I'm in here now in Flat Rock. But that was already planned years in advance. That's what was supposed to be happening back when the 2013 Escapade happened in the first place. So, at that time, my children were limitedly allowed to go over there. We did not go inside or have contact for some years. And there was minimal Christmases where we briefly went in, I think, a couple of Christmases down the line. Not anytime recently. Not anytime in some years. So I guess you could say since 2013, there's maybe like 2 Christmases where we might have went for a couple hours. But in the meantime here, my mother was portraying herself to have still had custody of and raised my 2 kids, or I don't know what she was telling people after I had then had the other baby or bought this home. I'm not sure how the story shifted or changed, but it had to have at some point because of the size of the house and what's going on and what's all gone on since then, and this other kid now exists. But because we were already well aware of her shenanigans, even though we didn't fully understand the scope of it, we already knew this child is not going to have any contact with her. They are not to have a relationship. He is not to go over there in the manner in which the other 2 kids or had been allowed to leave with my dad. We already knew that was not going to be allowed because of the 2013 escapade. So that has always been the case. My dad has always been allowed to see my younger son. He has just always come to my home to see that child. But I mean, since I've had this home, he comes here anyway. We don't go to their house. We don't ever go to their house. We never did. It was never a thing. So, you know, I don't know how she twisted the story and portrayed it regarding the other two from that point to this point today. The problem is there is still brainwashing and manipulation going on. And at some point I did implement some rules and tell my dad, you know, you're not allowed to, when driver's training was going on and COVID was going on, I did say, you know, you can take them driving, but they are not allowed at your house, because my mother was controlling his behavior as well during this time. He was showing up at my house, creating some problems prior to his injury and during COVID. And my dad was taking my two older kids for, you know, driving around for driver's training. But he did take them over there without my permission and against what I had said, which further caused some issues down the line and numerous, police incidents at my house in Flat Rock over those situations, because what she was doing when they would go there is she would repeat delusions to them, and then they would be brought back to my home where they would then cause problems. So shortly around that time, by this time, I'm already severely injured with the carbon monoxide. I'm already incapacitated, not receiving proper treatment, and then eventually started at the private center at the beginning of 2019, but then ended up, you know, I was still incapacitated, but I was treating at the center, but there was still police issues, because the kids were then coming back screaming these delusions. My mother was programming them. Just let's say they stopped over there for an hour in the middle of them doing the driver's training and wherever they were going. That 1 hour was enough to program more bullshit into them, because she had access on and off throughout their younger years, that even though she didn't have full access, she had some access. It wasn't much to reprogram the delusions to come out of their mouth. So when they were dropped back off at my home, down the line, like during this, that's when these 911 calls were prompted in Flat Rock, while I was extremely injured. And because she had prevented treatment within the medical system, and I was treating an inpatient injury on an outpatient basis, and in the beginning I had no treatment the first 14 months, it to them did look like I had a mental disorder. And because my children were screaming delusions that were programmed by my mother, and separately my older son had some delusions programmed by his paternal grandmother as well, it's a totally separate situation, but mostly this all pertained to my daughter around this time. But I mean, really the whole household was in shambles because this kept happening, because it's actually my mother at the root throwing stones and hiding her hands. And then at some point she had manipulated my dad so heavily that he was coming over and doing the same thing to an extreme degree, where the police then had to be called on him. And at some point I realized there was also a spiritual issue, which I tried telling him, and my mother had left to go to California for a couple months. And then that's when I began to kind of break free from that. And I showed him that it actually was able to prove it. And the problem got a little bit better from there. He no longer acted in that extreme manner over here anymore from that point forward. But that's where it all kind of led to. In the end, it led to that. But the problem is the delusion repeating had been going on when they were very young, and I had no contact and was not in the presence of them being around, or her being around them when they were that young, when it was initially programmed into them, for it to be reinforced later down the line. And then with my dad, it had been going on all these years anyway, all these decades anyway. I just didn't realize to what degree this all was until probably, I'd say about 2020, it had fully clicked, like how serious the situation was. 2019, 2020. And that's when I had brought Charmaine in at the beginning of 2020 to start documenting this, because it was that extreme. And then I then had enough proof. That's where I started putting everything together. I know, like I said, I was very sick. I wasn't really able to put everything together immediately, but so much had happened along the way. Here I was able to piece things together slowly but surely over the course of time, and gather enough information to at least start bringing in a professional and put professional eyes on the situation, to show somebody else that, hey, something is seriously wrong here. And that's when she was brought in and continued to stay involved every week from that point forward, is still involved today, and she's going to see the rest of the situation out until arrests are made, because now it's grown to such an extreme degree of what has all gone on. There's at least 10, 12 people that need to be arrested right off the rip, I'll tell you that, and quite a few people who may be doing life in prison. So that's where it's led to. It all stemmed from that 2013 escapade. I'm not sure how the delusions and the perception had shifted and what she had told people and how it changed once I bought this house here in Flat Rock, because the size of the house and me owning it, and it was all my work and everything I was already doing as a single individual doesn't add up. I only needed my ex's name. I needed his income because I got injured giving birth. I needed his income on paper. I didn't need his actual income. I needed the income on paper because my income on paper was messed up due to the injury giving birth. Which is why he then signed his half of the house over to the youngest child eventually. So it's been out of his name for a long time. He hasn't lived here in over 5 years. And it was never supposed to be in his name. It was supposed to be paid for. This home was supposed to be paid for with cash. There was never supposed to be a mortgage. There shouldn't be a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So there's numerous problems here. All of this stemmed from the 2013 escapade, how we even got back together in the first place, because we weren't really even together. We just worked together, and we worked a lot of hours at that time where we didn't really have free time because we had young kids, and all we did was work and have kids at a young age, and that's all we really did way back then. So we weren't even together when my daughter was born. I just raised my 2 kids by myself in my own home out there in Newport, where I live for, I was out there for 4.5 years before I bought my next house in Taylor. So that's how it even came to the point where we had to work together to get together, where the other child even came about, because I was not planning on having any more children. And then I needed his income due to the injury on paper in order to get the home, in order to fix what had all been done. And he had played a role in causing those problems. And I told him that, you played a role in this. This is what I was already doing. You're going to help me fix this. So that's why he did that, and that's why he signed his half of that house over to the younger child, and that's why we all still have his work benefits. Because I had put so much on the line and lost all of that due to the escapade and the role that he had played as well. It doesn't matter. There is no, those kids are all grown. The younger one, there is nothing in the system regarding that child. There is no court order. There's nothing. There's no child support. There's nothing. I'm good with where it is, as long as I can somehow continue to pick up the pieces, as long as things continue to flow and don't slide backwards any further. I'll be able to pick up the pieces, and I'm good with that being that way, because that is how my mother manipulates. So that needs to stay that way. All these other children are adults, but the permanent damage is done to the older 2 children with the brainwashing, and my older son, it more so plays a role with the paternal grandmother, but there is a problem stemming from my mother as well. And then my daughter, it is all my mother, and it's a very serious issue, because it's an issue in the current, and it's led to all of these ongoing problems, and why she was truant for 1.5 years as well, because the Brownstown, Michigan Police Department does believe that my mother has always had custody of those 2 kids and had raised them, and had for all those years, well over a decade, believed that. And that's why she was truant all that time. And the ongoing problems I have in the current with those 2 children are stemming back from all of this long term, without me fully really knowing what was going on. But during my injury, once it became extreme, that's what prompted further investigation into this and that along the way. And because my injury was so extreme, it caused other pieces to kind of come out, and that's where I brought in the professional, and here we pieced it all together, and that's how we got to today in the current. But yes, it all stemmed from the 2013 escapade, which then had cost me $40,000-$50,000, I believe, in the long run. I mean, more than that, because if I had continued to do what I was doing at that time, I would have immediately made like well over $100,000 off the purchase of that home I was working on purchasing at that time. Everything was immediately disrupted for some time. So if that had not happened, it would have been a different house. It would have been, and who knows, because I would have leveled up. So I level up very fast. That's why I'm able to rebuild each time I'm wiped out. I rebuild 20 times faster than a regular person because I've had to accommodate these crimes into my life. My entire adult life, this has been going on. So I'm able to level up very fast. So let's say I hadn't gotten wiped out and I did buy a different house, I still may have even bought the current home I'm in at the time that I bought this one. It still would have been for sale at the time that this one was bought. I probably would have been looking to level up again and purchase another home again. So who knows? It could have still played out the same way. There would have just been another home purchase prior. Instead of me renting an apartment for a year and a half, and then renting the mobile home I had to rent for, it turned into 2 years, but it was supposed to be 1. Even then, I leveled up, had to start over from square one, zero, nothing. Had to get a new car, had to put myself in a new place to live, had to rebuild from nothing, and boom, what was it? 3.5 years later, I had a whole purchase of a whole other home that was even bigger than the home I had initially planned on purchasing, twice the size of the home I had initially planned on purchasing anyway. So this is not the first time this has happened, though, because if you look at my other videos, I got wiped out after my first home when I was 18, forced to leave that home due to CPS chasing me. And then due to the market crash and everything, I ended up agreeing to walk away from that house. The bank was ripping me off, was not trying to work with me. Doesn't matter. I should have been forced from the first home. So there's all these level ups along the way. That is how I work at such a rapid pace and I level up so fast because I've been used to accommodating my mother's chaos and crimes into the mix of my life, my entire life. Especially my entire adult life. So all of that was nothing but delusions, crimes, chaos, conflict, all for what? No reason. We can bring the friend in at any given time and do the video. We can ask her opinion in the current because she's been through it all with me. I've known her since the 6th grade. She's watched all this go down over the course of time. She could give you her account of everything. So maybe I'll do that at some point. But her mother has been more of a mother to me along the way. I still have contact with her mother and see her from time to time. And she's more of a mother than my own mother. And that's the case with a couple of my friends' parents. I have like secondary backup mothers at a distance who kind of oversaw me along the way due to what I was always dealing with. And they saw I was dealing with this before I turned 18. So those people, were there along the way, and some of them I do still see some of them from time to time. So, that's probably part of the reason I'm semi-normal, and there's several reasons. But I did have a dad, even though he was being manipulated, and now he is permanently injured, and I have been banned from him for over a year. I did have like a more normal-ish father, but the issue was he was under my mother's control. And now due to his injury, yes, we've been banned. So some things are going to have to happen going forward. Arrests are going to have to be made in order for me to be able to see him. All of that has gone on regarding that situation. That is all crimes as well. But again, everything I just spoke about stems from the 2013 Escapade, which turned into the fallout of the next and the next and the next and the next. Like I said, everything piggybacks off the last batch of crimes, and it just keeps on going. It never stops. And the longer this goes on, the more people and agencies get involved and involve themselves. And the higher up that I build, the more people and agencies there are getting involved trying to attack me or destroy this or that, or inserting themselves in my life or trying to do this or that, or, there's all these problems. But the higher up I get, the worse the problem becomes. And once my injury became extreme, it really became extreme. So, clearly, I'm wanted dead. I'm aware of that. That's why I just released the video yesterday about my mother is a serial murderer, basically. She's a serial attempted murderer and has gotten away with attempted murder numerous times, and was caught in the act and the actions against me as well. So you can view that video as well. But yes, I'm very well aware, have been for some time, that I am wanted dead. And there's a very big plot twist at the end of all this, because I am getting there. And there are things being worked on. I am doing what I can. I can't make anything move any faster, like I said. But that was today where I am today, and what's all gone on is the fallout from that initial 2013 escapade with all of these crazy situations that happened all in between that time and this time, and the fallout and what I'm currently dealing with my oldest 2 children, which is not repairable. Even if arrests are made and things happen, I don't believe, unless certain measures are taken, it would have to be legally, it may be able to be repaired, depending on how the legal system deals with those two. Because they are involved in some of this. So there's an issue there. Depending on how that is dealt with, it may be fixable, but I don't think it's going to be 100% fixable. It's never going to be, we're never going to be a normal family. I'm never going to have things running in a normal way, which is why my youngest is kept completely separate from all of these people. My kids were all supposed to be on my team building with me, and they are not. It is now just my youngest. We build together. I teach him, he is 100% homeschooled, whereas the other two are not, to the last couple of years of school. But he understands where things are. He understands everything that's gone on. He understands why we have things the way we have things. He understands why he doesn't have a relationship with his maternal grandmother. He understands everything. Not only that, but he spent several years near death with me. So he is way more emotionally, spiritually, and mentally advanced than my other kids ever were at that age. And it's because of everything he's been through and what he's had to endure to fight to stay alive. We both fought for our lives for some years. So, and that is due to all these crimes as well. So, like he totally understands it. He's my partner. He's my business partner, and not only that, but we both still walk a fine line between life and death, and we both still require treatment. So, yeah, that's where I'm at going forward. I just had to get that 2013 Escapade video out there because I know I keep mentioning it in all the other videos, and people are probably wondering what that's all about. But it's not funny. But I'm sure, if you would have looked and seen what was going on that day at the church and how all that went down, I'm sure it looked funny. But the way the show went down, this woman deserves an Academy Award winning a trophy for her acting on that day and the manner in which she was screaming how I was on drugs, how all of that played out and looked to the other individuals surrounding. She deserves an award. That was a very good job of acting and putting on a show. I've never seen anything like it. I don't even think I've ever seen anything like that on TV. Yeah, it's really not funny. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it because I know I keep mentioning it in the videos. Kind of give everybody an update of where things are today, what's actually gone on. People think I'm so naive. It's really the exact opposite. I just have a lot on my plate, and there's times where my life is at a pause because I can't take any further steps because of everything that goes on. And a lot of it becomes out of my control. So that is part of the reason I'm self-employed, due to this chaos, the crimes, long-term conflict, all of that. There's numerous reasons why that happened, because I had to be able to accommodate everything that was going on in my life years ago. And part of this was that. So, that's part of what helped me build to how I build today and how I level up as fast as I do and how I rebuild how I do. It's just I'm permanently injured now and things are a little different. I just have to be really careful about how the steps that I'm taking going forward, and there can't be any missteps along the way. And we do have to maintain treatment. That is the bottom line for us right now. That does have to continue on. But yeah, actually I have to run to Home Depot and I know it's getting dark, so I don't want the video to go dark. But I will be back with another one. Thanks. Bye.